Welcome back, DIVEBOMB IndyCar podcast, and finally we've got back-to-back race reviews. It's been a long time coming, but we are back to review the Indy GP, which is once again won by Álex Palou. He wins his fourth race in 5 to start 2025, as well as becoming a three-time back-to-back winner of the Indy GP. Not the three-time defending winner of the road course race Indianapolis, because Dixon won that random one in 2023, but becomes a three-time winner of the Sancio Grand Prix if we're using sponsor names, and continues what has been a historic start to 2025. It is the best start to a season since AJ Foyt in the 1960s, where he won something like 7 in a row or something ridiculous. But I think they're all farmers then and carpenters who did IndyCar in their spare time. It's much different nowadays, and we're entering really uncharted territory in what Álex Palou is achieving. We're running out of superlatives to give to Álex Palou, because every week we're like, how amazing is Álex Palou? And the next week he'll do a job which wasn't quite as good as last week, but another performance just as special. And as I say, continues a historic start to the season, which we haven't seen in modern day IndyCar. Of this level of domination wasn't as easy for him as it was in Barber. Graham Rahal, of all people, made it a bit more difficult for him than in previous races, but he continues to leave his competitors in complete awe in what they can do to beat him. And every week we hear from the other podium finishers, we have to work out a way to beat this guy. And every week they can't do it. He continues to just dominate, is the word, in a fashion that we haven't seen in years and years and years in the sport.
Yeah, we are 5 races into the season and he leads the point standings by 97 points already. So in this hypothetical world that we often mention, he could probably sit out 2 races, and unless someone else was to win the next 2 races, he could feasibly still be leading the standings, which is pretty astonishing. I think I saw a tweet from Nathan Brown who said that Palou could essentially just start and finish last in the remaining races and he would finish 12th in last year's standings, and this after 5 races of this utter domination. But I think the portion of the race that just to me was just so laughably incredible was after he'd finally got past Rahal, another killer stint on the primary tyres from Palou, stops for the final time. All of a sudden, from what felt like nowhere, he was leading the race by 8 seconds, and this was like a matter of laps after taking the lead. And then that was 10 seconds in an instant, I think, over Pato O'Ward at that point. And the lead just kept getting bigger. And then, there was a bit of jeopardy. We had a caution for the first time in 408 laps. And that's not even like it's a 250 lap oval race thrown in there. No, that's 408 laps across road and street courses. So that was possible jeopardy for Palou, but no, expertly managed the restart. He didn't really come under any pressure and kind of immediately just settled back into that rhythm that we know so well, and meticulously recouped, I think, a gap of over 5 seconds by the finish. It just feels impossible what he's doing. Like, I can't really fathom how what he is producing is possible, because, you mentioned the fact that it was Rahal that took the challenge to him. If anyone does take the challenge to him, it's a different guy every week, whereas Palou is always consistently the quickest guy in the field. It's so impressive, because it is uncharted territory in IndyCar. It doesn't matter the track, the tyre compound, the competition. He's just always there. It feels almost unfathomable. And he's obliterating the field. Like, there's no two ways about it. They showed some close-ups of him in the closing laps, and even after the caution, he still looked like he was pushing, but just pushing with kind of such precision. And I think he was consistently like over half a lap quicker than anyone else in the field towards the end of the race, which is, a word I keep using is magical. But this is a guy who's 28 years old. This is only his 6th season in IndyCar, his 5th season with a front-running team in Ganassi, and he's already being placed among some of the best names that the series has ever seen. I think people need to realize how ridiculous that is. Even his fiercest rivals and competitors are pretty in awe. Will Power in the post-race press conference was just consistently saying that this is just amazing. And he also said if Palou's to go and win the 500, it might be like the greatest story ever. So he couldn't have been much more effusive in his praise. But yeah, I think the other thing I love about it is Palou just looks like he's enjoying it so much. He doesn't look like this is a chore. He's not feeling any pressure. He's just so calm. And every time he wins a race, it's the same kind of emphatic and celebration. He always has this kind of contagious, beaming grin on his face, and he doesn't look flustered. He's just, I think, unflappable is a word I always use. I think as a collective, that team as well, the camaraderie there, the kind of collective effort from them is pretty unbelievable. It was interesting over the weekend, actually. He was quite candid in saying that no longer having off-track distractions has been a big part of his success, harking back to obviously the contractual disputes with Ganassi and McLaren. But no, I mean, from start to finish all weekend at Indy, he was the quickest and pretty much tormented the field in each session. And okay, I get that people would say it's boring this, boring that. I think we should just enjoy it, because this is greatness unfolding before our eyes, and it's unprecedented, it's historic. And as I always say, he's making the unpredictable become pretty beyond predictable, which is stunning.
And he's never really, he just never is very arrogant about his business. He always seems to be rather humble when he reflects on his achievements, and he does play it down. He does play it down quite a bit on what he's achieving. This isn't normal in IndyCar at the very least. So
I would say he's aware of what he's achieving, but he doesn't get carried away. He doesn't get carried away by it.
So yeah, I don't know what happens from me. I mean, the 500 is probably the most realistic chance of any race that streak's going to stop. So, but the commentators kept on harking on about how he had the strongest car at the Open Test, or one of the strongest cars at the Open Test. But 500 is a different kettle of fish. Doesn't matter how good you look at the Open Test. I mean, Colton Herta last year, his car is so good in traffic, and he blew it away halfway through. So that's a completely different story. But look, we'll look to the 500 more at the end of this episode. But it really continues to amaze people at what Palou's doing. And I said this in my preview on the website, that if Palou does win, it feels like he's pretty much got one hand and four fingers on the Aston Challenge Cup, and it rather does feel that way, where for him to not win the championship is going to take some ridiculous amount of misfortune, which, let's be honest, Palou hasn't had his fair share of misfortune across the course of his career. I mean, and he's either got to drop off his performance, which doesn't seem particularly realistic either. So,
I mean, given that he doesn't have like the same challenger, quote unquote, kind of every race, it seems like he's adding like half a race more gap to his lead over whoever's kind of floating about and fluctuating in second place in the championship every race. So, like he could have one weekend where he has a mechanical, gets only 5 points, and he'll still have a sizable buffer, which I think he'll still effectively have a race lead. Sorry, yeah,
even
more or less,
second place.
More or less. I thought he gave some great quotes actually about, he's obviously never won on an oval. If he was to win the 500, it would be a first oval when it would continue this unprecedented run. And he said that he'd make sure the whole of Indiana knew about it, that he'd go crazy, like crazy. That was what he was saying. But no, I think just from start to finish, the weekend was amazing. I mean, qualifying, he was on pole by 0.4 seconds. I think he even conceded, okay, he was on a fresh set of alternates where others may have been on used tyres, but still, such a short track, such a competitive series as it's renowned for. That is a ridiculous margin. And he locks up on those tyres as well. So it wasn't like they were fresh first lap tyres. And I think, again, qualifying was kind of what showcased that he has this impressive ability to always be there. I mean, if there was to be a weakness of Palou's in the past, I think it was his raw qualifying speed. But now he has the quickest raw pace, I would say, in the field all of a sudden. And I think it was McLaughlin in the Fast Six was his nearest competitor that made the Fast Six, and he was fifth in points and 90-odd points back coming into the weekend. But I think, and then we'll come a bit more onto the strategy element with the tyre rules for the weekend, but they strategized perfectly all through the weekend. I think this was a real weekend that showed what a perfect team effort it was, because some teams they only had 4 sets of alternates for the weekend. Some teams used some in practice to get a read on them. Some used 2 sets in the first round of qualifying. Palou did not. He literally used them for the first time in his final run in Q1, topped that session, and then I think he had a fresh set left for the Fast Six and a fresh set left for the race as well. And I thought the strategy they played in the race was really impressive as well. They used tyres in the first 2 stints, going from the alternates to the primaries, and then put the fresh tyres on at the end. And I just think that was a bit of a masterstroke, to be honest, because as long as Palou was kind of in the ballpark by that midpoint when he could then start using his new tyres, he was always going to seize. And I think when he eventually was piling that pressure on Rahal with the primaries, it was again that kind of case of Palou feeling like he was in the box seat and feeling in control despite not leading the race. I always just had a sense that he was still controlling proceedings, even if he wasn't at the front. He didn't really. He's again unflappable. He lost the lead, and he was like, well, I wasn't going to fight it too hard. I wasn't going to push him off track, which was the only way I could have kept ahead. I knew I'd get him back. I knew I could be patient. And yeah, it was obviously decisive when he got past Rahal, and then he just absolutely flew away at the end. So yeah, perfect strategy from the team, and I think it's obviously credit to Palou that the execution is always pitch perfect as well.
I think we need to get on to Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan racing, because I predicted they'd be quick this weekend. Again, I said it in my preview, keep an eye out for them. They've been really, really good at the Indianapolis road course. Their record here is incredible. They've been close to winning so many times, and it wasn't a surprise to see them. They were quick, but I was surprised about how quick they actually were. I mean, 3 cars in the Fast 6 once again at the IMS road course. Rahal obviously leading the pack in second. Foster was once again qualified for the Fast 12. He made the Fast 6 in this occasion in third, and obviously Di Francesco qualified fifth. And I think his only 2 Fast 6 have both come at the IMS road course. So his record here is unbelievable by itself. And joining a team who seemed to be absolutely cracked at the Indianapolis road course was going to be a combination for the ages. And the race pace at this race has been a bit of a problem. I know Rahal almost won it the year Dixon pulled out his magic. You've had Lundgaard get a couple of podiums here. And Rahal got past Palou at the start. I did always feel Palou was going to find a way, but I was surprised that Rahal did keep on for that long. But obviously running the blacks on your final stint was kind of going to spell your doom, really. So that sort of ruined his race. He ended up being 6th in the end, which all things considered isn't a bad result in the course of the outlook of their season. However, you feel like they would be a bit disappointed, especially when that was the only car in the top 10 in the end. So you feel like they'll probably be a bit disappointed for this weekend's proceeding. But the pace is there. But this weekend always seems to represent a huge chance for them every year. It was their only podium here last year. It's the only race you feel like they've got a chance at winning. So it's a mixture, because obviously it's a good weekend because they've shown they've got pace on their day. But this is also the race they seem to circle on their calendar. And to leave with only 1 top 10 might feel a bit disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny situation because they clearly know why they're fast here, because they can repeat it every year. But I think it's always a struggle for them to actually translate it to elsewhere, or often a struggle because they've not started the season particularly well as a team.
Well, they haven't had a top 10 to this point. They haven't had a top 10 in 6 races before this.
Yeah, there you have it. And I think Foster was the best qualifier previously in 10th. It must be said he's made the Fast 12 in all 3 of his road course races so far. So that's pretty impressive. But yeah, I mean, there's obviously been a big change this year with the hybrid system, but regardless of what changes there are, it's impressive that they managed to maintain their speed at this track, but they obviously just can't quite figure out how to transfer it to elsewhere. But it was the first time they've had all 3 cars in the Fast 6. I know Graham Rahal spoke, a lot post qualifying about the impact that Jake Fry's had and just the leadership and just how he is doing things that team has not seen to really just knit them all together. And in the long run, that's really going to be a major addition. I think we kind of expected that from the outset. But yeah, I guess just to drill in on the individuals, Rahal, it was an excellent move on Palou, wasn't it? I think it's just a reminder, I think, that when people kind of write him off and say that he's getting too old, he needs to retire, he can just, why don't you go and take over from your dad as the leader of the team and what have you, that he's still got it in him when the circumstances are right and when the conditions are right and when the car is there. He's got it in him, and to go and take the fight to Palou. And I mean, the first stint, I know he was on used tires against new tires against Palou's used tires, but he still managed to really control the race for that portion at least. And ultimately, it just felt like the strategy was probably wrong. I think he got cornered by having to run the primaries in that final stint. He was always going to get eaten up by those who had the alternates, which did seem like the preferred tyre. But
especially after the caution.
Yes, absolutely. But I mean, I just sensed a bit of desperation from Rahal. I mean, he's only got 6 career wins, which kind of feels like not a lot for someone of his kind of caliber, his veteran status. He's not won since 2017. And the stat that Nathan Brown tweeted was that no driver since 1946 that has gone more than 100 races winless has actually won again. Rahal's at 128 wins, or he was at 128 races without a win. But no, I think he'll probably be disappointed that he fell off the podium, Rahal. He had a bobble on his final stop, as did DiFrancesco, which took him out of contention. He was running really well in the race in the top 5, DiFrancesco, which... yeah, I was impressed by, because I mean, by the end of the first stint, he was putting pressure on Palou, which was super impressive. On the same
used tyres.
Yes, so that was really impressive. But then I think it was Palou's in and out laps that really kind of then for the second stint had him right in the back.
Still, didn't he, in the pits to DiFrancesco, didn't he?
So that was on his second stop, I believe, and then after that he kind of tumbled a bit. I was impressed with his first stint because when he led, obviously, this race a couple of years ago, having made that major move around the outside from 5th to 1st, it was kind of, he dropped off very quickly, so he held his own for a while, and it looked like he'd at least be on for a top 10, but I mean, he tumbled down 17th in the end. His best race finish is still 12th, and I mean, he's trying. He's trying, because I mean, Rahal keeps telling this story of how when DiFrancesco first joined the team, instantly he was on the phone to Graham asking for advice, particularly with tyre wear. I think that's probably where he seemed to struggle just holding on to the tyres. I think that was an issue for Foster as well, but for him to actually hold on to 11th place, I thought was a really good result regardless. I know he started 3rd, but I mean, just to say as well, to qualify 3rd for his 5th ever race as a rookie is pretty stellar stuff. So yeah, I think they will be disappointed as a team. I still think 6th for Rahal is a good result when you take away, obviously, the fact that he did start on the front row. But yeah, I just feel for him. No, but by the end of the day, no one seems to be able to beat Palou. No one seems to be able to beat Palou, and I still think it was a heck of a drive from him.
DiFrancesco 17th just sort of sums up his career. It feels like we've seen this 2 times, just a random flash of something, and then just to be nowhere. I think Foster might be a bit disappointed. I think there's a top 10 on the cards there because he was battling for 10th.
Yeah, I was tuning into his radio for the most of the second half of the race actually, and he got. I mean, they saw on the broadcast actually. He got passed by Rosenqvist quite late on, and was complaining that Rosenqvist actually was off the track when he overtook him. I know there's no track limits in IndyCar, but there were, I think, some rules enforced. Nothing was done about that, but it was tyre wear that he said was kind of just what let him down a little bit. But I still, compared to how he's fallen off in kind of the 2 races prior that had been representative races for him, yeah, I thought it was a good effort.
Well, here's the question now: will Rahal ever win again in his entire career?
I mean, this seems like the track. I guess Portland's the other one that kind of, because I guess it's similar-ish sort of track compared to your Road Americas, Mid-Ohio's, Barbers. Characteristic-wise, Trackman Dan, would you agree with me?
Yeah, it's quite.
Because
it's
fairly obviously
flat,
took the pole at Portland as well.
Fairly flat, not many high-speed corners.
I actually think this was Rahal's first Fast 6 since that kind
Portland.
of that streak of 2 successive road course poles where he took pole on the Indy road course in Portland. But yeah, Portland, I guess, is the other one. But will he win again? Yes, he will win again. I
think he will win again.
I want to be positive. I thought it was a really good drive. It was gutsy. It was gritty. And I do think he deserves. I think he deserves to be on the podium. I would say
it was his first Fast 6 in Portland last year.
Yeah, Portland 23.
No, 24.
Oh, was he? He was in the Fast 6 in 24, was he? Okay.
Yeah, he was. So you think he'll win again in his career?
I think so. Maybe that's just me being positive.
Suit yourself.
But
suit yourself. I don't think he will. We've got to say the harsh truth on this podcast, and I don't think he'll win a race again. I want him to.
Okay.
Like, sure, it'd be great. It'd be a good story if he wins again. But they're only good at 1 track a year. Well, 1.5, apparently, because we've been finding out now they seem to be quite good at Portland. But you can't be good at 1.5 tracks a year and win. Because he's not going to move team, is he, again? So,
yeah.
Sorry to be the Debbie Downer on this podcast, but I've just got to take the truth.
Maybe he'll win the 500. I mean, they seem they seem genuinely really positive about the 500. So.
Well, that's giving me a chuckle. But he almost did it a few years ago. There's that 21 where his tyre went. He almost did it. But doesn't matter. Anyway.
One thing I would say, actually, I'm just reading through my notes, actually. Foster, we saw I felt like for the first time, some proper wheel-to-wheel stuff as well. I mean, he threw Lundgaard off the track at turn 1 at one point with a pretty bold inside pass, which, again, you've got to ruffle feathers like that if you want to be an IndyCar driver. So I thought that was pretty good to see, actually. And then he defended pretty well against Rosenqvist before eventually getting past. So good to see that sort of racecraft. I think it didn't feel like you were watching a rookie in those wheel-to-wheel duels, which is good to see.
Pato O'Ward finished second, and I said, again, in my preview, I can't remember if I said in the podcast last week, but I saw this as a really big weekend for O'Ward because Lundgaard's been really strong here in previous years, and it kind of felt Lundgaard was getting a bit of the upper edge on O'Ward in recent races, and O'Ward made a bit of a statement finishing second in the end, qualified 8th, which was the top of the Arrow McLarens. I mean, Lundgaard qualified 14th. Considering that this was a track we expected Lundgaard to go so well at, it felt like it was a bit underwhelming, actually.
It was a messy one.
Yeah, it felt quite underwhelming. But O'Ward, on the other hand, as I said, I thought it was an important weekend for him to be on the pace of Lundgaard, and he actually really exceeded that. I mean, in the team, he seemed like a class of his own. It was a bit more of the O'Ward that we're used to. We know he doesn't like the hybrid, but this is a track where I feel the hybrid might be less important because there's not as many high-speed corners. It's very stop-starty compared to
I think that was the
circuits.
consensus. I think Daly mentioned that on his podcast, actually, after the test.
Yeah, it's not as reliant because the track is so stop-starty and therefore the weight doesn't make as much of an impact. And we know O'Ward hasn't liked the hybrid, and it was a good result, actually. He sort of progressively worked his way through the field. He made important moves when he needed to on drivers, and the team did quite a good job in the pits because he jumped McLaughlin, but to be fair, McLaughlin made an error coming into the stop. He obviously got Di Francesco in the pits when he stalled and stayed in front of Power. So all things considered, I actually thought that was a really good weekend for O'Ward. He moves himself up to 4th in the standings, which I don't know if it feels too high or too low. So
I mean, I don't think I personally, looking at that gaggle, I don't even see it as obviously Kirkwood's second in the standings.
I don't know how
they're so far back that this would at this point in the season usually be drivers who were, I mean, with that gap to the guy at the front of the championship would usually be 5th, 6th, 7th, lower top 10 of the championship. So it's a weird gaggle.
But Kirkwood being second feels really weird because it feels like he's only been present in one race this year.
But it's that same situation though, that one race was important because no drivers have really had the same sort. I'm not saying a low level consistency, but we usually see drivers. They'll be in the top 10 every weekend, and you'll get to the midpoint, and you're like, yeah, there's still 3 or 4 drivers who've had top 10s every race, what have you. But this year, it's just been, as we've said, a bit all over the place in that regard.
I mean, Lundgaard was the only one who, other than Palou, who had top 10s every race.
Good point. That's broken now.
That's now broken. But it feels weird that Lundgaard isn't second in the standings because when you compare him and Kirkwood, Kirkwood did a great long bitch, but he was pretty. You haven't really felt like you've seen him at the other races. I don't know how he's ended up in
podiums. Yeah, you are correct.
And an 8th place in St. Petersburg. Anyway, let's finish on Lundgaard because I was disappointed. I think there was definitely we expected more, which in some ways says how much he's exceeded expectations at Arrow McLaren. But of all the tracks, I expected him to be strong here, so I was a bit disappointed from Lundgaard. Siegel had an okay weekend. He finished ahead of Lundgaard. Lundgaard actually got a penalty, didn't he, for crossing over the pit exit line?
That killed his race. That killed his race because I think otherwise he probably would have. I think he would have been easily in the top 10. I mean, he said in their kind of post-race debrief bit that he felt that he could have been on for a result like he had at Barber if it wasn't for that, because that obviously lost him a hell of a lot of time. Because he had to obviously come back through the pits, do a drive-through for that. So that was a costly error. I also feel with Lundgaard that he isn't actually qualifying extremely well. He was qualifying consistently in the Fast 12, but obviously other than the thermal front row, he hadn't had a headline qualifying result. And again, it wasn't awful this weekend. He qualified 14th, which obviously isn't great. But it's
only
down the 20th.
Just off the Fast 12, isn't it? If you bet
exactly.
Fast 12, it's a different
story. But at the same time, he's not necessarily judging by the pace that he's had in the races, a bit like what we spoke about with Power earlier in the season. I wonder if he was putting himself in the Fast 6 consistently, whether he may have a win, maybe not have a win by now, but it's hard to say he could have had more because at the end of the day, when he has been on the podium, he's not going to have beaten Palou. But I think he probably over the long run does need to just sort his qualifying out a tiny little bit.
But it's never been a strong point for Aaron McLaren qualifying, ever. O'Ward has never been a good qualifier.
And it's funny, O'Ward's race was amusing and a bit like Power as well. There's not really much to say on Power and O'Ward's race because they kind of just got to the podium by, I don't know, maybe not circumstance, but I know Power said he didn't pass a car all day and he made his way from 7th to 3rd. And I think that's kind of symptomatic of the racing that we're seeing, but it's kind of all being done by strategy and circumstance. Obviously, McLaughlin making his error, Di Francesco falling off the podium due to his issue in the pits, and likewise
McLaughlin's error wasn't seen on the broadcast. He basically tapped the wall entering the pits.
He overshot. He had a big oversteer and basically overshot it. Ended up on the grass. It's quite a tricky pit entrance. Actually.
A bit of a weird one, isn't it? You have to take a completely different line to 13.
Yeah, it's a bit like, I guess it's a little bit like Barber. In a way where they have to kind of just come flying. They almost, rather than take the corner, they have to just kind of carry on and brake a bit later.
Like that a few places, actually.
There's some interesting pit-ins, aren't there?
There is. We do like analysis on pit-ins every single week. I quite enjoy that. Power was in third, and I actually think Power's on a really good run of form, but because he's not really done that much, which is broadcastable, we haven't really spoken about it. But I've said this every week. Power's seat was under pressure at the start of the season. We made a whole sing and dance about it, and he's quickly. I feel like at this point, if you don't go for Power, you're a bit of a maniac. So, yeah, I mean, there's an argument to say he's been a top Penske this year. I know he's started behind McLaughlin in the standings, but he's actually finished in the top 6 in each of the last 4 races. And St. Petersburg does actually look really costly for Power in the standings because it feels weird that he's in 7th because I feel like saying him behind Dixon feels weird.
It does. It's all over the place. But you do look at, to be fair, Kirkwood back to Kirkwood in 2nd, back to Rosenqvist in 8th. That's 26 point difference. So
yeah,
easy swings.
It's strange. But anyway, I actually thought Power seemed pretty happy, and I think he's got quite a good run of form going into a good time of the season, and it was another good weekend for Power. I think this is the weekend which completely eliminates any chat about where his seat goes.
Probably. I think especially when you look at AJ Foyt Racing haven't really been on it, so Malukas maybe hasn't proven what we expected him to prove. But yeah, I mean, he's clearly put the qualifying. I don't know whether to call it qualifying woes, whether it was more circumstantial in the season. But again, he qualified 7th, which was good. And yeah, we spoke a lot last week. He's good at this track, and yeah, as I said, he didn't pass a single car, but he had the pace again. And yeah, I mean, it was funny when he said that in the press conference, actually, that he didn't pass a single car. O'Ward burst out laughing. And O'Ward has probably been the most vocal driver against how the racing has been with the hybrid system. I guess just looking at the Penske's weekend as a whole, they all made the Fast 12, which was, again, they haven't consistently qualified this year, and they were in a proper killer group as well, that Group 2, which was also the one that Rahal and Di Francesco impressively managed to progress from before their stellar qualifying. But yeah, McLaughlin, I mean, he probably should have been on the podium. He probably should have finished 2nd, really. It was quite a costly mistake on pit entry, really. I think if Barber was the first race where it felt like Penske managed to avoid like a super... someone's had a terrible stroke of luck. But Newgarden, who made the Fast 6 for the first time since Road America last year, when he obviously had that massive crash at the end of that session, which that's a long time ago. It was his first Fast 6 since then. But then he had I think it was an MGU issue, which he also had in practice at Barber, which meant he had to, he went through pit lane, but never stopped in pit lane, which then put him to the back of the field. And then he was told he could retake his spot. And then I was listening into the radio, and Tim Cindric was then frantically saying, no, you've got to go back to the rear again. They've been told you've got to go to the back, which led to the start actually being aborted while Newgarden figured himself out, got him into the right position. But that was his best qualifying of the year, puts himself in the top 6, and it's all undone by an issue out of his control. So
it's a shame because that's 2 weekends now when Newgarden's lost out on big points. Probably like a top 10, it's hard to say, but top 10 probably. That's a lot of drop points for Newgarden. He actually lies 12th in the standings with only 2 top 10s, only 1 top 5. So it's disappointing for Newgarden, and he still isn't the Newgarden that we expect. However, it has to be said he isn't having a lot of fortune right now. But look, it was exactly the same last season, and look what happened come 2 weeks' time.
Exactly. It just feels eerily similar again, doesn't it? But it does feel very much like last season, just like the first 5 races feel like a microcosm of what last season was on a whole, really. That it's just, yeah, okay, he's had the peak of the St. Pete podium, but he's just having too many troughs and results that aren't going to win you a championship. Like 12th in points after 5 races over a quarter of the way.
I'm looking at his results, and basically ever since 2022, he's just had a shocking start to the season. I mean, his starts of seasons have never been. He sort of picks up momentum in the summer, but yeah, it's just been.
I mean, it would take something heroic for anyone to beat Palou, but it would take something it would be a miracle if Newgarden got even close.
Newgarden this year is 152 points behind Palou.
I mean, this is the thing. Like, you're already at a point where you can wipe anyone out of contention that's like 10th or beyond in the championship. Really, you feel like already.
But even 9th place Colton Herta is 144. That's basically 3 races.
Yeah, it's just been scruffy from Newgarden, but I think I would say he can't catch a break. It's not all his fault. He hasn't always seemed to have the pace, but to be fair, he did have good pace to come back to 12th from the rear.
I'd also argue it feels like he's the weakest Penske at the minute.
Probably at the moment, yeah. Maybe when we get to the ovals, he'll show up again, but yeah, I think it's fair to say.
Dixon ends up 5th, actually, which isn't bad because he started 16th. It's a case of a lot of others. If Dixon actually qualified well, he'd probably be towards the pointy end of the results. But I mean, it's Dixon's trademark to have recovery drives through the field. But again, we didn't really see any of Dixon. He just ended up in 5th, so I guess, mostly in strategy.
It feels kind of emblematic of the season that he's had. I mean, he's not transferred to the Fast 12 in the last 3 races, so he's on a run like that which Power had at the start of the season. But he's putting in some sneaky good races, isn't he? I feel. And I mean, it must be said, actually, let's just touch on Kiffin Simpson, who, I mean, he had brilliant pace all weekend. Like, he was second in opening practice. He was the best of the rest in that session away from Palou, and he was top of the timesheets for a little while in second practice as well, and carried that over into qualifying, made successive Fast 12s. First time he's done that. I believe, I mean, he qualified 10th. That must be his best starting position yet.
Yeah.
But I mean, last season, he only had 3 starting positions that weren't in the 20s. So he's made a big jump. I don't know whether that is kind of a result of, obviously, Ganassi much less stretched this year, having cut those 2 cars, more focused personnel on Kiffin's car. But he's making good improvements. And then he couldn't take the start of the race because his gearbox gave up before the race, that was a really tough break because this felt like a proper opportunity to log another top 10 finish for him. I felt like it was a good weekend. It's just a shame we didn't get to see him in the race.
There's quite a few people like that. I mean, Colton Herta probably deserves to touch on as well, actually, because
Andretti as a whole, I think.
You would say that Colton Herta's start to the year has been pretty okay. He's driven pretty well. St. Petersburg, he has the fuel issue.
I would say he's been one of the fastest drivers.
Yes, but yeah, St. Petersburg, he's got the fuel issue. Thermal, I know he didn't lose anything of it, but he obviously got that weird fine. Long Beach was okay, but just got unlucky in the strategy. Alabama, fair enough, he made a mistake at the pits. Indy GP, obviously, his front wing gets slightly knocked, and he basically ends up retiring. Lap 64, he retired. I mean, he was a lap down after about 4 laps. So it's like his pace has been pretty good. He was 13th for qualifying, which isn't ideal. But again, I've said in my preview, Andretti aren't good here traditionally. I mean, they haven't won here they won in 22, but other than that result, they've been like shocking here. I think since those 2 wins in 22, they've had 2 top 10 since, and the best is 9th or something. And yeah, I mean, I just want to make an overall point of Colton. What my point is saying is his stroke of luck has been terrible for considering his pace has been actually quite all right.
Yeah, he's been so lucky. Point.
I mean, the same applies to Ericsson, actually, who, again, he qualified pretty shockingly in 20th. However, has a mechanical issue. I mean, I know he got spun, but that was while he was having that mechanical issue. So Ericsson's run of luck has been pretty abysmal too. Obviously, Alabama was just a disastrous weekend, but you can blame some of that on him. Thermally, obviously, spun again. Ericsson's form has just been a nightmare, and obviously he had an awful 500 last year. And yeah, he's not getting any fortune in the minutes. Marcus Ericsson. No, I do feel a little bit bad for him because whatever's happening is just not clicking for him once again this year. So I mean, 2 drivers at Andretti were having an awful run of form at the minute.
Yeah, I mean, it feels to me like Herta's the one who's had the more misfortune. I still feel like Ericsson's been
Ericsson's a lot of
little bit
self-inflicted
scrappy.
errors, but this weekend, okay, he didn't qualify well, but at least his issue wasn't his fault.
I mean, they were poor on the whole this weekend, Andretti, I thought, pace-wise, really. I mean, you often see them coming out of the blocks really fast in practice, but from the outset, they were just pretty anonymous. They were nowhere really in terms of challenging that front pack. And Kirkwood and Herta were both in the easier of the qualifying groups, and neither of them had the speed to transfer. Kirkwood down in the 20s, and then Ericsson...
They qualified 13th, 20th, and 21st as a team.
And then, I mean, Ericsson didn't make it again after what felt like a slight return to form at the start of the season, pretty consistent. He's now had a couple of wretched qualifyings as well. So, yeah, he was 10th in his group also. Yeah, started down in the 20s, as you said, Dan. Yeah, that's kind of not what we've been used to from them, because they seem to be very reliable in qualifying. But no, I mean, I think Kirkwood attributed some of the qualifying to the fact that they hadn't run on the alternates in practice, and they wanted to save them for the race, but ultimately they didn't get a read and the balance wasn't there. Herta, I think, to be fair, actually said that he felt the balance of the car was good. They just weren't quick. They just lacked speed. I mean, they do seem to be getting some of the weaker tracks out of the way, but I'd still think, I mean, they regarded Thermal as a weaker track. They regarded Barber as a weaker track. They regard the Indy GP as a weaker track.
So basically any road course is a weak track.
So they've got too many weak tracks, basically, is what I'm kind of deducing from that. But no, I think
they're not a good oval team either. So like,
not brilliant. I think they need to find what they're doing on street courses and really translate it, because I think that is becoming a little bit of a problem. Yeah, I mean, it got worse on race day as well, because Kirkwood and Herta both only logged 2 laps in warm-up because they had technical problems. Then Herta at the race start got that front wing damage immediately, fell a lap down. And I actually thought he put in a pretty good drive, actually. He fought quite nicely and managed to get himself back on the lead lap at one point by passing the entire podium. Ericsson, I mean, it was a double whammy, wasn't it? He had his issue, he slowed. Malukas ran into the back of him, he spun. We thought that could have been the caution, but even with the mechanical, he managed to get going again. And then, didn't get back out.
Because on lap 1, same corner, we had Daly struck the curb. I didn't see if he hit him, but Daly struck the curb, and Ilott checked up into him, and then Newgarden ploughed into the back of Ilott, which could be a caution, but wasn't.
Nope. Well, no, I mean, just to round off Andretti, it was lack of speed, reliability issues really plagued their weekend. It was a disaster, wasn't it, really? I was actually pretty impressed with Kirkwood's race, actually, it must be said. I mean, he obviously started down in 21st, made his way up to 8th, and kind of seemed to do so pretty seamlessly. I think they pitted quite early. They went for quite aggressive undercuts. But no, he was pretty downbeat after qualifying. So the slight glimmer in a disastrous weekend for Andretti. But yeah, salvaged something from it, but not much. It was only in 8th place. But again, Kirkwood's consistency, I think, impressive.
Right, we'll do the running order. So Palou won, obviously, ahead of O'Ward and Power on the podium, with McLaughlin and Dixon running at your top 5. Rahal was 6th ahead of Armstrong, Kirkwood, VK and Rosenqvist, your top 10. I know you want to touch on VK. I will quickly touch on Rosenqvist, though, because I felt like he had a bit of a messy weekend, because he went off on his final qualifying lap and he spun during the race. So I'm not quite sure how he ended up back in 10th, because he had quite a major spin. So I've got no idea. I saw the results yesterday. I was like, hang on, Rosenqvist was 10th? I thought he spun.
I had the exact same thing. After the caution, all of a sudden he was, I don't know, I think maybe he was 12th and managed to get around Newgarden and then Foster, obviously. He spun in a fight with VK. It was a bit of a clumsy error, really. He kind of seemed to make a half move on VK. VK would look kind of slow on the exit, but Rosenqvist then, just completely dropped it. And then I don't know whether he spun again later on. We didn't actually see a replay, but we saw him recovering from an off-track moment. It was messy. It feels like it's been a messy couple of rounds for Rosenqvist and Meyer Shank after such a strong start. But no, he still managed to salvage it.
I just don't know how. I just said I wasn't touching it because I saw the results. I was like, hang on. How he ended up in here?
And I can't remember Armstrong's other results off the top of my head, but this was probably his best weekend of the season. He actually made up 8 places. He qualified in 15th. So quite a few drivers that seem to make a bit of progress, but again, it seems to be
a lot of messiness from a lot of different individuals.
It was a messy. I feel like it was just a messy weekend. It felt like we had a lot Santino Ferrucci blew an engine in warm-up, and he'd already had a mechanical issue through practice. Robert Schwartzman barely got any practice laps. It felt like there was a lot going. Yeah, again, it felt like there was a lot going wrong for a lot of different teams. I mean, I'll transition this to Rinus VeeKay, but Dale Coyne Racing. I mean, Jacob Abel didn't run in warm-up for I don't know what reason, and then he ended up retiring from the race with 18 laps to go or something like that, and I also don't know what happened there. So it just felt like a lot was going wrong for a lot of teams, whether drivers making errors or just mechanical things going wrong there. Much higher frequency than we see. But yeah, VeeKay, I mean, another top 10. That's 3 on the season now in 5 races for a Dale Coyne Racing team that, as we've spoken about, finished best of 13th last season across the entire season. So continues to impress. I mean, he qualified not very well at all, actually. He qualified down to 24th. They just didn't have the pace. But then yet again in the race, I mean, it was a very similar race to Kirkwood. I think he was another who kind of pitted a bit earlier and went for a bit of an aggressive undercut. And once he was kind of in that position up in the top 10, he just stayed there. And he was the biggest mover, 15 places gained, actually. So I know Newgarden kind of could be the biggest mover because he also will have gained 15 from essentially starting.
No, 14 because Simpson didn't start.
Oh, that's a great point. So VeeKay, I'm not taking this away from VeeKay. Then brilliant. I don't know why I was trying to take it away from him anyway.
But in fairness, Simpson did also qualify better than VeeKay, so it would also be 14 for VeeKay. If we're being really,
that's a great point. That's a really good point. But no, I think just that pace is obviously something we did not see out of Dale Coyne last year. So yeah, just to say, continues to impress.
I mean, I don't think I said this publicly, but I said last year I just don't think they had a good caliber of driver, and I think I'm starting to get on your side of Rinus VeeKay might actually be a bit underrated. So, oh yeah, we'll see if he gets a top drive soon.
A bit.
I can't commit yet. Maybe Dale Coyne had been a sleeping giant and have just never had the drives to show for it. I mean, Lucas was getting podiums in this car 2 years ago, so that's my point. Anyway, we'll finish off with the rest of the running order because, as I said, it was a bit jumbled, it felt, the running order in the end. But anyway, Costa was 11th ahead of Newgarden, Siegel. Alexander Rossi was in 14th. Qualified well again, actually, to Rossi, but ended up 14th. Congratulations, by the way, to the Rossi family, as he is now a father as of this weekend. So congratulations to him. Connor Daly was 15th ahead of Christian Lingard, Devin DiFrancesco, Robert Schwartzman, who actually got a penalty.
That is a great result.
Back up. I mean, you say that, but there was only, I think, 3 cars behind him on the lead lap.
I mean, Christian Rasmussen being one of them in 19th.
Okay, but
he's had a bit of a disappointing start to the season.
He had a drive-through for pit speed violation.
Okay, so that makes sense. I was wondering, because he'd looked pretty sporty throughout the weekend at shit points. I still don't think he's had a great start to the season. He's been quite anonymous compared to Rossi. But this was supposed to be about Schwartzman. So I would just say that very impressive again. I mean, he's a very, very bubbly character, but it felt like the frustration was starting to boil over a little bit. I felt like in second practice when he had another issue after having, I think he had a fuel pump issue. It was reported in first practice, and he had an engine problem in second practice. So again, he went into qualifying with no laps for like the second or third time this season on the track that he hadn't driven this track before. So it's going to be very hard for him to build rhythm as a rookie when he doesn't get any laps. But to then actually go and I mean, where did he qualify? He qualified last, which was understandable. but to then go and finish 18th in the race, I think, yeah, regardless of issues others had, to still be on the lead lap, I thought was pretty impressive. But yeah, I mean,
being on the lead lap though, when there was a late caution, to not be on the lead lap, I'd argue would be pretty disastrous.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair, to be fair. But even, he could have been, Abel was getting lapped after about 30 laps. So
True.
He could have been lapped at that point. But no, I think his words in second practice were, his words were no words, he said. No words, don't know why it's going on or what's going on or something along those lines. So frustration was there. Prema seems to be having a lot of problems. It's not been an easy start for them. But Schwartzman, I think, is still putting in some...
Is that their best result to date? Might be. Let's have a look. 18th. Ilot's best is... Yeah, that's their best result to date. Joint best. You finished 18th in Long Beach Race. Ahead of Ilot on the standings, actually. Ilot's 26, which is pretty disappointing.
I mean, he's had an unfortunate start to the season. I mean, he
got unlucky, obviously, in the race.
Yeah,
he ended up 6 laps down. So he must have had an issue at some point.
He went into the pits a few laps after being hit, so I assume he had some sort of damage. And that was his race gone at that point.
Ferrucci was 20th. Again, he qualified decently in 11th, but I don't know how he ended up in 20th. No idea. Anyway.
That was just on a whole. Ferrucci's weekend was so scrappy. I mean, he did really well to qualify 11th because he had a mechanical issue at some point in practice on Friday. Huge engine blowout in warm-ups. That obviously set him back. That's 2 engine failures for him in as many weeks at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway because he had an engine failure in the 500 test as well. So penalties will be pending for Ferrucci. Just a turbulent one. He dropped a lot in the first stint, didn't he? I don't know whether he was having issues with tyre wear, but he was very... I think they were reporting on the broadcast. He was like a second a lap off the pace.
Oh, yeah, they did say that, didn't they? Yeah,
so that was his race loss.
By the way, look, they're not a championship contender like Ferrucci's claim. They still get to claim top 10 as that team.
I mean, it's very, like, that just gets worse and worse every week, that claim.
It's a bit of an embarrassing statement. Yeah, I mean, this was where they started to pick up form last year. They did get top 10 here, but yeah, they just look like a shadow of themselves, really.
Yeah, I wonder whether, is there anything in the fact that Penske have obviously had not a trademark Penske start to the season, and Foyce have obviously had a downturn as well. Don't know. I don't know how much you can read in it. I think it'll be interesting when we get to the 500. Obviously, they don't have Michael Cannon this year, and if Penske are strong, I expect Penske to be strong. They look strong at the test. Will Foyce still be strong? I think it's going to be very telling. I think it'll be interesting to see.
Stingray Rob was the last car on the lead lap, and then Ilott was 6 laps down. Malukas had, a disastrous weekend, but he did bring us our first caution in 500 laps. We'd effectively gone 5 full races of green. I mean, Malukas will be not remembered for anything this weekend, apart from the guy to finally bring out the caution after a barren run. So well done, David Malukas.
It's been a tricky start to his stint at that team. I mean, he qualified 20. I don't know what happened in qualifying. He qualified 26th, which will have been second last in his group. So I don't know what's happened there, but rough start. They do seem to have made a regression, that team.
Huge regression.
Massively.
I mean, their best finish, they got 11th in Long Beach, but to still not claim a top 10 at 5 rounds in from what we were expecting from this team, you can only be disappointed.
I mean, Long Beach as well, that was when Ferrucci was 11th, but second last on that strategy and the only car behind Schwartzman.
Yes, true. And then Abel obviously had a mechanical issue, as well as Herta, Ericsson and Simpson, who didn't make the start. We spoke about this briefly last weekend. Again, I spoke about it in my preview. You should read my preview every week, listeners, because my preview on the DIVEBOMB website gives you all this.
You are plugging your preview so much today.
I've never done this before, but look, all my points I made in my preview. Andretti not being good here, RLL being good here, Palou's form, this Tyrrell, it's all in my preview every week. And Indianapolis, a bit about the track, how its characteristics. Read my preview because it gives you all this information and it makes listening to this podcast easier. But anyway, we spoke about this Tyrrell. So 2 sets of alternates they had to run and 2 sets of primaries. Obviously, they usually have to run a sticker set of alternates. They didn't have to this weekend. And yeah, that was it. 2 laps of minimum on each tyre, which obviously it's usually 1 alternate, 1 primary. And it gave mixed results. O'Ward and Power seemed to quite like it, and they were really pushing for it at a race like Detroit, because obviously we've seen it in St. Petersburg and Long Beach, where the alternate tyre was effectively useless, and everyone was just racing to get off it. And if you force it somewhere like Detroit, again, another street track, it forces people to go on there for a little bit longer. So that's why they were advocating that. Dixon absolutely hated the rule, from what I saw. So a bit of a mixed reaction to it. I thought it was okay, the rule, but it starts to make it feel a little bit forced, is what I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's hard to tell how much of the good stuff that happened in the race was a result of it, really. I thought there was actually...
like it created a little bit of jeopardy, it felt.
I thought there was, like, as much as they were restricting the strategy, obviously, because this is traditionally a 3-stop race, there wasn't going to be any extra decision that had to be made beyond that. I thought there were actually still a decent variety of strategies within the kind of parameters of the rule. You had, where the teams would run used or new tyres, at what point they would use them. Obviously, Palou using his new tyres at the end was pretty important for his race, and obviously who would use what compound when and what have you. But I think it just goes against the ethos of IndyCar kind of, I don't know, strategy feels like a big part of it, and it kind of just feels like they are limiting the flexibility that gives the teams decisions to make. So yeah, I mean, maybe it will work well on street courses where you obviously have that big fall off on the alternates this year. Power, I think, described it. He said it would be something. I think it would be, yeah, it'd be pretty cool, especially if they mandated that you had to say run 2 green flag laps on each compound or something. But yeah, I guess just the race on the whole, it was probably my favorite this season so far. I still don't think it was exceptional. It felt closely contested, which I thought was good. It wasn't. I mean, obviously, Palou ran off and hid at Barber, and he did it in the closing stages of this as well. But obviously, Rahal being there at the front kind of seemed to make things interesting. It was exciting in some respects, and this is something that our good friend, the podcast, James Scott, said, that actually I think a lot of the interest and the excitement came from intrigue rather than actual action. It was kind of the concept of what could happen rather than stuff that actually ended up happening. There still wasn't a ton of passing on track. Obviously, Power made that joke of the fact that he got to third and didn't actually pass or see a car all day. But I thought it was better than some Indy GPs we see. It's often not the greatest race because obviously teams are just so familiar with that track. It can become a bit processional. But no, I mean, yeah. What do you think?
Fundamentally, we're here to watch the racing, and the racing still isn't very good. It was jeopardy because Palou couldn't overtake Rahal for 40 laps, despite being quite clearly the quicker car. So I don't want to go on the same hybrid rant every week because we went quite in depth in it last week.
We had that last week.
But look, I will give this a bit of slack because this has never been a particularly easy race to overtake, despite having the longest straight on the calendar. Now, I didn't want to say this earlier. I actually think starting first here is a bit of a disadvantage because we've seen it quite a few times. So on the start, somebody gets done in turn 1.
Well, it's a huge run, and I think actually the driver on the outside, if they can get enough alongside, they essentially have the inside for the next corner, don't they? So
yeah, so I actually think it's a disadvantage here to start first. But anyway, it's a different story. I also think the characteristics of turn 13 and 14 actually make it quite difficult to overtake anyway. And as I said, in previous years, this wasn't an easy track to overtake it anyway. So I will give it a bit of slack. However, it's still not good that it's so difficult to overtake. And look, we all know why that problem is. And Power and O'Ward are coming up with so many solutions to try and improve overtaking. Well, why do we have this problem in the first place? We shouldn't be coming up with gimmicks to sort out a more fundamental problem. We all know what the problem is, and trying to create gimmicks to solve the problem, like NASCAR are renowned for doing, is not a good strategy.
Yeah, I feel like that's fair. I feel like we've had a few races this season where it's kind of been. The field spread's been a lot more than we've been used to. Obviously, that's kind of a result of the lack of cautions. But even before the caution this time around on Saturday, I felt like it was kind of a case of it did feel a bit closer, but it's all well and good it being kind of closely contested, small gaps, whatever. But it doesn't really matter if you can't get close enough to pass. And it just looks so hard to follow. I mean, nobody other than Palou could get around lap cars. And I guess that shows how good Palou is. But there's such a struggle to get past lap cars. Obviously, there was that sequence, I guess it was around lap 30 when Rahal just couldn't get past Abel, and even Palou was not able to make any inroads on Rahal there because he was stuck in the dirty air of 2 cars, and you had Di Francesco and McLaughlin kind of, and it was a 4-car train and quite close together. But again, it was just a bit of a procession. No, I thought it was a better race, but it was still more intrigue than genuine.
Yeah, I think we're maybe being a bit generous because this race has been terrible previously, apart from when it's been wet, and it was actually probably the best race this year, which says quite a lot. Because I said to you, this would have felt like a pretty poor race last year, and it's actually looked like a really good race to what we've seen this year. So, look, I'll give them my thoughts. Don't create gimmicks to solve a wider problem. I mean, look. People on Twitter say get rid of the hybrid, which I'm not going to say I disagree with, but it's just been a disaster. And obviously, its biggest challenge will come in 2 weeks' time. And if it's just as bad then, well, we have a bit of a problem on our hands. Anyway, let's go on to some awards. I reckon. Should we start off with top 3 drivers of the weekend? Well, I think we know who our number 1 is. That doesn't really need much discussion. So second and third is obviously where I think I'd definitely give Rahal second.
Agree. Yeah, I also give Rahal second.
And then third is a bit more of a lottery, to be honest. I think there's a few who you could put in here. I would Right, this is a tough choice, to be honest with you.
I've got mine.
Okay, go for yours then.
I'm going to give it Foster for his qualifying performance.
I will go with O'Ward because I said this would be a big weekend for him, and he proved me right. So
Yeah, it's a difficult one. There were just two very runaway standout drivers this weekend, it felt like.
Unsung hero, I know who you're going to go for.
Yeah, I couldn't go with him at Barber because he was too sung. So yeah, it's VK, obviously.
No, I'm going to go Marcus Armstrong. We barely touched on him, and it's one of his better results this year. I know it's sort of a safe option, but no, I actually thought he had quite a decent weekend. He needs results like this. Better pace than Rosenqvist.
I'd give an honourable mention also to Kirkwood for his drive. And to be fair, Newgarden as well, because that was an impressive charge through the field, I thought. Robert Schwartzman again as well.
I still think you're over hyping. I mean, 18th was their best finish, and that's
I'm not saying it's good by any means, but given like he didn't run any practice laps again, and this was a similar weekend to what happened last time. He didn't run any practice laps as well. He actually got a not going to say semi-decent result, but in the circumstances.
So basically, what you're saying is Schwartzman needs to just skip practice every week, and he might be all right.
Well, if he's finishing 18th for the rest of his career, maybe not. But
any funny moments from the weekend?
I had a couple.
Okay, cool.
On the podium, when they called for them to spray the champagne, there actually wasn't any champagne there. They forgot to give it to them, which was slightly embarrassing. But I don't know whether that takes the crown or the commentary when we finally got the caution. I thought was absolutely hilarious, and it was probably quite telling that was one of the most exciting moments that we've had to shout about in 2025 so far, unfortunately. Yeah. But I thought it was great. They got so excited, and I think it was fitting of everyone's kind of thoughts. So that was good.
We'll move on to the predicted tournaments, and you'll be glad to know, listeners, we have finally got the results. We are so sorry it's taken so long, but we thought we won't keep waiting any longer. We'll finally give you the results. We'll quickly start off with the 13th place. I don't know. Well, we do this, and we forget half the time, but we just about did it in time this week. So I went for Armstrong, you went for VK, so nothing going this week. We'll do our Fast 6 predicted tournament. Do you want to read out yours first of all? Who you put?
My Fast 6, my Firestone Fast 6, for those watching on YouTube, was Palou, McLaughlin, Lundgaard, Herter, O'Ward, and Rosenqvist.
So you got two. That's a bit disappointing for you. I went for Palou, Power, Lundgaard, O'Ward, Rahal, and Newgarden. So I ended up with 3. Yes. I ended up with 3. Nice. Palou, Rahal was a shout. Come on. And then
well done. That's a good shout. So I did say, like, retrospectively, after we did the episode, I was genuinely thinking, I should have put Di Francesco. Because it would have been a slightly fun shout because of the rest of his qualifying performances / results. But also, like, genuinely, I mean, it would have paid off. But no one's going to believe me now.
No, nobody is. I was just going to put the whole Fast 6, but I just changed my mind at the last second we were recording.
I know, so yeah, I do it every week.
Just a shame, really. So, Archie, your current total post-Indianapolis is
and we don't know this. We don't know this.
Well,
I don't know this.
Well, I'm adding up as I go along, so I don't know either. Your total, as things stand, is 13. My total, as things stand, is 12.
Get in.
So you lead by uno. So
tight.
This has always been a really tight tournament. It is expected, but this is always no one's ever really had a lead of about 4 or more.
Well, it doesn't help when we put like the same drivers bar one every week.
We'll move on to the podium predicted tournament. This week we actually both predicted the same thing, not knowing we both predicted the same thing. So we actually both went for Palou, Lundgaard, and Power. So that actually got us a really good yield this week of 6 each. So that was a slightly quirky result this week. So we somehow both went for the same thing. We've got a habit of doing this, don't we? We need to stop this habit.
Well, I'm happy with that. That's good.
It's not a bad habit to have if we're getting it mostly right, to be fair.
Hey,
so
if one of us is in the lead at any point, then just keep predicting the same as the other, and there's no chance we'll lose.
Well, you bottled it in Nashville last year by predicting it was going to rain out in the Fast 6. So,
oh gosh, I forgot about that.
Yeah. Anyway, Morgan went for Lundgaard, Palou, Herter. There's a lot of Lundgaard bets this year. Didn't pan out this race, so it didn't pan out very well. But Morgan got 2 for Palou. If you're not predicting Palou first place, I honestly don't know what you're doing. But hey ho. Fans, you went for Palou, Hurt, and Lundgaard. Again, a Lundgaard guest. I don't know what's going on, but that got the fans free, so that's not too bad at all. Jackson went for Kirkwood, O'Ward, McLaughlin. So it's like a rogue shout, but still got 3 for O'Ward, so that isn't bad. Ivan went for Herta, Palou, Power. So that, again, not bad. That's 5. No one's seen Andretti's form here because am I the only one who realised this? Andretti are terrible here as well. I mean, no one else seemed to realise it. James went for Palou, Lundgaard, and quite a rogue shout of Foster. Would have been an excellent qualifying guess. Only 3 in the end.
Decent shout. I like it.
Decent shout. It's only 3 points, so a bit of a shame. And then Tom went for Lundgaard, Palou, and Power. So very popular guesses, Palou, Lundgaard, and Power this week. I mean, we were the only ones who got it in the right order. So, but still, that's 5 for Tom there, which isn't too bad. And as I said, I finally have the standings. I'm doing this on Excel, so we're going to sum it all on Excel and see what happens. So my total is 17 at this point so far. Archie, your total is 20.
Nice.
At this point so far. The fans are 14. Morgan is 12. Ivan is 11. Jackson is 12. James is 11. And Tom is 18. So you lead. So
I'm not quite the predictions Palou, but I'm happy with that.
So you're top by 2 ahead of me, then Tom is 1 ahead of me. So us 3 are actually pretty close. And there's a bit of a gap to the fans on 14. And there's a gaggle when Morgan and Jackson both were 12 and Ivan and James were 11. So it's actually getting a little bit of a championship fight going between me, because it was me, you, and Tom last year, wasn't it? The championship.
Yeah.
So
this is good.
We're just the best. We're just the best. They're simply the best. But
undisputed.
Undisputed, yes. And we continue because next week is obviously not a race, but we do have qualifying for the 109th running of the Indianapolis 500. Now, because it's the 500, me and Archie have decided to do something a bit funky this week. And like we did for the standings at the start of the season, we're going to predict the entire 34. We're only going to count the fast 6. And again, it doesn't have to be in order as usual. It's just the 6 that you guess. But we thought we'd have a bit of fun this week, and we'll come back to it next week at some point and see how we get on.
Yeah, because this is our final episode pre-qualifying. We'll try and do an extra one ahead of the race along with our qualifying recap. But
yes,
yeah, next time we're with you, we will have had qualifying. Exciting.
Yes, so we'll be back here for qualifying. I will say now, there's a likelihood that we're going to be covering qualifying live on DIVEBOMB websites. If you're not watching, tune into our coverage, which you quite possibly might do, and keep you updates, and we'll have a fun little day, I think. So we'll look forward to that. And as Archie mentioned, we think just to give us a bit more time to preview the 500, because obviously we want to review qualifying, but also preview the 500. We'll probably have an episode out Tuesday, as we usually do. Then we'll probably have another episode either Thursday or Friday time, and obviously have our review for the 500 probably the following Tuesday. So I'm going to be abroad that week, so good old holiday travels in the podcast. But let's do our 34. Let's go 34 to 1. So have you got yours up? Do you want to start with your 34th?
Yes, I've just got my notebook up. My 34th. So we're starting off with the brutal bumping of Robert Schwartzman.
You go Schwartzman. Okay, I'm going to go for Jacob Abel, just on the basis that car didn't qualify last year. Let's do our last chance qualifiers. So there's going to be 3 of them as we're doing a last row. So I've gone for Schwartzman, Di Francesco, and Ilott.
In what order?
33rd to 31st. So Schwartzman last car in the field.
I'm going for Abel 33rd, Rob 32nd, and Harvey 31st because he had a pretty rough test. They haven't got many laps.
Cool. 30th, I've got Stingray Rob.
I've got Ilott in 30th.
Cool. So pretty similar so far. I've got Harvey 29th.
I've got Di Francesco in 29th.
So we've got exactly the same up to this point. So top 28 is all to play for. I've got Louis Foster 28th.
I've got Ryan Hunter-Ray 28th. Again, Dreyer and Ryan Bold. Indy only focus, but they did not have a great test.
Got Graham Rail 27th. A bit better fortunes this year.
I've got Connor Daly 27th. I think Hunkos may struggle. Just a hunch. I don't have anything to back that up with.
Got Marco Andretti 26th.
I've got Nolan Siegel 26th.
Oh, a bit of a struggle for Siegel, you think?
Yeah, I'm going with Andretti. I'm going with Aaron McLaren being one of the teams that maybe doesn't deliver as they usually do.
Oh, okay, fine.
Especially if the open test is to go by and Chevy weren't sandbagging, and maybe it might be, struggle. I don't know.
I've got Ed Carpenter 25th.
I've got Kiffin Simpson 25th, which I think in retrospect seems quite harsh, actually.
Well, I've got 24th, so I'm not much better.
Okay, I've got Ed Carpenter 24th.
Oh, fine. I've got Ryan Hunter-Reay 23rd.
Marco Andretti 23rd for me.
I've got Helio Castroneves 22nd.
I've got Louis Foster 22nd.
That's a good qualifying for him, you reckon. I've got Connor Daly 21st, a bit higher than you do.
I've got Christian Rasmussen 21st.
Oh, wow. He seems quite good at last year. Fine, interesting. I've got Scott Dixon in 20th.
Wow, I've got Christian Lundgaard in 20th.
Dixon's never been a good qualifier. I mean, I know he's a bit better, but Christian Lundgaard 20th. Wow, that's surprising.
But my big Aaron McLaren prediction.
Yeah. Armstrong 19th for me.
Armstrong is also 19th for me.
Oh, wow, fine. I've got Ericsson 18th.
I've got Castro Neves 18th.
Malukas 17th.
And I've got Ericsson 17th.
Siegel 16th.
And I've got Malukas 16th.
Rinus VK 15th.
I've got Graham Rahal 15th.
Oh wow, you expect a really good qualifying for Graham.
Yeah, I think their test is going to be telling. As in, they're not going to necessarily be fast 12 or 4 cars, but I think they're going to improve.
Maybe I've done too harsh. We'll find out. I've got Kirkwood 14th.
I've got Ferrucci missing the fast 12 in 14th.
Okay, fine. I've got Rosenqvist, the last one on Saturday to qualify.
I've got Sato, the last one, missing the cut for the fast 12.
I've got Rasmussen in 12th.
This kind of goes a bit against my Aaron McLaren thing, but I think they'll have 2 stronger cars. I've got Larson in 12th. Because for some reason, he's not going to run the fast 12, is my prediction.
Oh, okay, fine. I've got... you should have time.
It might be a bit of rain.
It's the past 6 they're worried about. I've got
it might rain, though. I think it's going to rain.
Fine. I've got her to 11th.
I've got Kirkwood 11th.
Ferrucci 10th.
I've got her to 10th.
Rossi 9th.
I've got Rosenqvist 9th.
Lundgaard 8th.
I've got VK 8th.
Okay, wow.
That's bold, but we know how good he is. He's never missed the fast 12, so.
Got Larson 7th.
I've got O'Ward 7th.
Sato 6th.
Dixon 6th.
Palou 5th.
Rossi 5th.
O'Ward 4th.
Hauer 4th.
McLaughlin 3rd.
Newgarden 3rd.
Newgarden 2nd.
McLaughlin 2nd.
Oh, you want to kill our sport. You're killing our sport. I've got Power first.
I've got Palou to take the pole. I think Ganassi are going to have a bit of a revitalization this year.
Okay,
they're struggling a bit in qualifying last year.
Cool.
There's not much to base this off. This is all purely predictions.
Yes.
We'll do another one on Fast Friday, albeit we'll have to report back on our post qualifying podcast.
But this one's more important. I think
this one's more important because it's more random.
But as we said, it's now time to look forward to the 500. So obviously qualifying. I wish qualifying started Tuesday. Practice starts on Tuesday. This will probably go out on Tuesday in fairness anyway. So the day of release is probably when practice will be starting. And you obviously got practice the entire week until Friday. And then we start qualifications on Saturday, day 1 of qualifications ahead of day 2, which will obviously decide who's bumped and who qualifies on pole on the Sunday. And then obviously, as we said, we'll be back on Tuesday to review that. There would be another practice day Monday. So dependent on when we record it, we might go over that as well. But anyway, stay tuned. Across the course of the week, we'll have practice roundups every single day. I will have my post-race grade book from this race
on the website.
On the website. Yes, my post-race grade book will be up on Monday as well. I might do a bit of a qualifying preview as well. And yeah, any pieces you want to plug?
Well, we'll just have post-race, end of day quote roundups of all the key storylines from each day will be going up as well, from practice, qualifying, all through the 2 weeks, the best 2 weeks of the year. I'm so excited.
And I did forget to say this. Well, I don't know if it was relevant last week or not, but anyway, I did forget to say this a couple of weeks ago, so it's only fair that we mention it now, because the 8th of May 2023 marked the first episode of the DIVEBOMB IndyCar podcast. So this week we celebrate our 2nd birthday as such.
Wow.
I don't know if that's the right word. It's 2 weeks of the podcast. I thought I did forget last week, but thought it'd be nice to bring up this week because It's the 11th on the day of recording, so we have just hit 2 years of the podcast, which is it's kind of flown by. But it feels like we're doing this for ages, but it has sort of flown by at the same time. So I don't know.
Mad.
I don't know how
It's
I
mad.
feel.
It's been one hell of a journey. But happy birthday to us.
Yes. Happy birthday to us. I think that's a nice way to end off. A nice fulfilling way to end off as we review the Indy GP once again, won by Álex Palou as he continues his dominant start to 2025. As you said, next week is where all the action starts to build up ahead of the 109th running of the Indianapolis 500, and we'll be back to review qualifying day next Tuesday. But for this time, thanks very much for watching, thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you